Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give it a minute. We can still see a lot of people still joining the webinar, so just going to wait for those numbers to settle, and then we'll make a start. Excellent. So the numbers look like they have reasonably stabilized. So I suggest we make a start. So thank you all very much for joining us for this BBSRC Follow-on Fund webinar. Really great to have everyone along to join us. The webinar's aim is just going to introduce the Follow-on Fund, run through its aims, and sort of the application process, including some pointers for applying and pulling applications together. You've got the whole kind of, if you like, follow-on fund team from BBSRC here today, and Faye will be introducing everyone in a moment, my colleague who's the Senior Portfolio Manager for translation. We'll all pop up at some point as the presentation goes through, either answering questions or talking through some slides. As this is a webinar, if you could type any questions you've got as you're going along in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer as we go along. And there'll also be an opportunity at the end for us to run through some of the questions as well. But other than that, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Faye, who's going to run through some of the slides initially.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone. So I'm Faye, as Adam mentioned, the Senior Portfolio Manager focused on BBSRC's translational programmes. So for today's webinar, let me just try and change slide. There we go. For today's webinar, we want to first take you through BBSRC's overall sort of support for translation and why we do it. Then we're going to talk in more specifically about follow-on fund, including some key bits of information about this specific call. Then I'll pass you over on to David, who will give you a better idea about the actual application process and what a good application looks like. As Adam mentioned, there's a Q&A section in the chat, so we'll be monitoring that throughout, and then we'll be able to answer any more questions at the end. So let me just give you an intro to the rest of the team. So this is everyone that's mainly involved in the follow-on fund aspect of BBSRC. So David deals with the overall management of the follow-on fund. I work closely with David, and my focus is more on the overall strategy for the follow-on fund. And then we have Jane and Helen, who manage the delivery of the programme. So they work in a different team that deals with all the mechanics of behind the application and assessment processes. And then we have Azin, who's our head of BBSRC's translation and innovation capability, and Nick, who is the Associate Director for Innovation, who provides oversight for all of our translational activities. So you're probably already all very aware of this, but I'll just present a little bit about who is BBSRC, just to give a bit of background and set the tone for this webinar. So BBSRC invests in world-class bioscience research at UK universities and research institutes. we also invest in the training and skill development of the next generation of research scientists. So we want to deliver wide support for economic and societal impact of bioscience research investments across a range of different routes, including industry, policy and public goods. And as public money is used to fund BBSRC programs, it's really important that we engage with the public to emphasise the value of bioscience research so they understand where their money's going and what it's being used for, and they can see outputs from that. So moving on to BBSRC support for translation, as I mentioned, we have this responsibility to enable the conversion of bioscience research discoveries. So the public money that's being used to fund fundamental research, eventually that we hope to gain some return on some of that fundamental research that actually is realised for the public. So that could be into products, improved processes and services that will benefit the general population. So it's really important that BBSRC not only supports fundamental research, but also the translation of those research discoveries behind them and support the scientists along that journey of technical development and scale up and innovation. So we do have a portfolio of support to enable different translational research aspects from really early stage engagement, working with investors and end users to understand maybe the opportunities that are out there. Maybe some researchers aren't quite aware of exactly where their research could lead to. And then we also support through to the large scale technical development that requires much more significant investment. So we also recognise the value in providing support, not only for the science, but also for the development of the entrepreneurial and enterprise skills of the researchers involved, because they're the next generation of innovators and we need to keep them skilled up to be able to continue to innovate for the future. So, for example, some of you may be familiar with the ICURE programme. That's a 10-week discovery programme that supports important skill development, and it guides researchers through their route towards impact. We also partner with early stage investors. So given that sort of background of BBSRC's overall support for translation, the rest of the webinar is going to focus specifically on the follow-on fund. So I'll talk a little bit first about follow-on fund in general. So the follow-on fund exists to bridge a gap between research outputs and that achievement of wider impact. So we have sort of two different variations of follow-on fund that are detailed on the screen. So there's the standard FOF and the super FOF, and which one you apply to would depend on the sort of level of funding that you're requiring. So super FOFs are used for a bigger pot of money, so generally bigger scale projects. So the overall FOF programme is there to support two main areas of activities. So the first is in understanding and addressing that market opportunity. So as I said earlier, some researchers may have certain discoveries and they're not quite sure yet where that's going to go, and they want to do that sort of market research and then sort of the technical scale that follows that. The second is the discovery of the route to impact from that sort of initial discovery. I want to mention here also that if you're applying for follow-on funds, you must substantially draw on prior peer-reviewed funding from BBSRC. I also want to highlight that translational funding grants in general and also for this call, they're fundamentally different to responsive mode grants. So they generally involve a much more structured application process. So the application process will guide you through and ask you to highlight areas of your understanding of the current market opportunity, have a development plan, sort of how you want to go about your route to market, and then any wider benefits and ethical considerations from your funding. And this structure has been developed across UKRI, and it's something that we use as part of the follow-on fund application. And David will discuss that in more detail with you shortly. So for the final bit that I'm going to say is just to highlight the specifics of this actual call. So the funding part is £2,250,000. The closing date is the 5th of October. All of this information is available online already, but we just want to highlight here that the standard FOF applications are assessed by an independent panel. Super FOFs are also assessed by an independent panel, but prior to that they go to external peer review. And then there's an opportunity for you to respond to reviewers' comments in between reviewers and panel assessment. So all applications from that must satisfy that the project is based on a sound understanding of market and society need and opportunity. The proposed work is robust and designed to optimise benefit. And now I'll hand over to David to give you a bit more details on the actual application process.
Thank you very much, Faye. So the case for support, this is a key part of the application process and the application form. And as Faye mentioned, the questions have been developed in partnership across UKRI. And the aim is to help provide clarity for applicants in what should be provided, and also for the committee in requesting what they will need to assess applications. And it is split into 5 sections, which is the opportunity and market. So what's the opportunity? What's the market size? Who are the competitors? What's it looking like? Where does your innovation fit? Looks at the development plan and how you'll be taking forward that innovation through the follow-on fund and the technical work that you'll be doing. The route to market and intellectual assets. So how will the proposed project progress to innovation, and also outlining what the intellectual assets are that you've got and how that will be taken forward. You need to understand what the wider benefits are. So beyond the commercial opportunity, what are the potential societal benefits, environmental, economic, etc. And then also looking at the ethical considerations of it. So are there any considerations with your product, service, or technology, including things to do with regulatory and legal frameworks? The next one, thank you. Yes, the next slide is regarding a change that's happened with our program and others, where we're requesting applicants to complete a resume for researchers and innovators, and this replaces the CV. So instead of a track record section within the case for support and accompanying with traditional CVs, we're asking applicants to submit a 2-page capability to deliver statement. And this should describe how much each member named in the application contributes to new ideas, hypotheses, and tools, as well as how they have contributed to teams and collaborations, the research community, and to wider society. Applicants should only describe the selection of their outputs, and in each case clearly explain the relevance to their ability to deliver the proposed project. So next slide, please. So another important aspect is working with partners, project partners, as we describe it generally. So it may be appropriate and necessary to work with external partners in order to progress the innovation. This might be to access scale-up capability, to test innovation within a real-world setting. It's important that all project partners provide a letter of support detailing their involvement in and contributions to the project. Now, we don't expect all applications to have a project partner involved, but where it is appropriate to do so, we expect the reasoning for the partnership to be really clear. This should be articulated in the case for support and the statement of support from the project partner. You'll also need to, go back one. Yeah, so it needs to provide a statement of support, and that's also from the Technology Transfer Office. And the letter of support needs to confirm if the grant's successful, that a collaboration agreement will be put in place. I will just note that working with international partners is fine, as long as it's clear that there are no appropriate organizations within the UK that can partner with you to do that work. So what good looks like. Now, it's important to be clear, have a clear understanding of the customer need, and to describe that within the application. And then following up from understanding the customer need, have a clear development plan with the milestones and deliverables, and importantly, noting the risks and the mitigations to those risks that you'll have in place. So the committee do look out for the risks that there may be in that technical development work. So it's really important to make sure you highlight that. How will the work help to address the market opportunity? You need to be clear about that. And where there is a project partner or partners, ensure that their contribution to the project is clear and defined. Some common pitfalls are like I mentioned in the previous slide, having a poor understanding of the customer need, trying to address too many opportunities, and limited clarity around the intellectual assets. It's really important to be really clear about where those assets come from, what stage they're at, and then also outlining how you plan to manage those assets going forward within the project, and not having a clear description around understanding of the risks of the technical development steps and having those appropriate mitigations. It's really important to show that. So a couple of examples of projects that have gone through the follow-on fund. So Elasmogen Limited, this was a project that came through from the University of Aberdeen, Caroline Burrell and Andrew Porter. They applied for a SuperFOF, which enabled them to develop Endure. And Endure can be used alongside other protein-based medicines to increase the amount of time they spend in the body from hours to many days, increasing the therapeutic potency. This funding also allowed the team to humanize VNARs, which are antibody-like molecules that play an important role in the immune systems of sharks. Following this, they also received funding to undertake an enterprise fellowship, BBSRC RRC funded enterprise fellowship, and also received support through Impact Accelerator account awards. Since starting the business, they've collaborated a number of different partners, and they've attracted 13.6 million in grant and equity investment since being established in 2016. The next team was Professor Ian Head from Newcastle University, who, using the BBSRC follow-on fund, they collaborated with the University of South Wales and Northumbrian Water to take an innovative biosensor from lab concept into field trials. Following the follow-on fund, they have scientists from both those universities have also gone on to collaborate with Northumbrian Water, once again, Welsh Water and Chivas Brothers through an industrial partnership award. Using this award, the team will be conducting more extensive tests across different water streams, wastewater streams, and looking at different routes to commercialization. And this technology could help to protect the environment, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and save on costly water treatments. So at this stage, I'll hand over to Adam to manage the Q&A. So thank you, Adam.
Excellent. Thank you both for that and for the questions that come through on the chat so far. I was just looking to see whether there were any more questions coming through on the chat, and because of the way the system is set up, it's best if they come through as a text one, and then we can answer those as we go through. So I'll give it a couple of minutes for people to digest. And provide any questions that they might have. And I think if we stop sharing the slide, then we can have everyone up on the screen so people can be seen. Excellent. And as I noted in the chat, just in case anyone missed it, we'll make sure that we share the slides and the recording of the webinar afterwards. The recording might take a couple of days to get up, but we can certainly share the slides shortly after. And that's obviously got all the details, and all of the details that we talked through are available on the website with the associated guidance documents. I've got a question here about whether the principal investigator on the follow-on fund grant has to hold a funded project currently. It can be based on work that maybe ended a little while ago. I appreciate that things kind of go through iterations afterwards and develop potentially through a diverse range of funding routes. So that's absolutely fine there, but it would have to have some link and be based on some of the assets developed through previous BBSRC supported kind of research through a BBSRC grant. And then we've got some questions about projects that might be focused on developing sort of services like developing into some sort of CRO. Normally, we have seen a few of those. They're normally based on some sort of asset that is a sort of innovation or asset that is developed rather than as such always around know-how. So it's something that then has a user base. I think in principle, if there is a robust sort of business model, the most appropriate route to market is by creating that kind of service offering. I think that is something that could come through. It's not something we see regularly, but there's no particular reason why we shouldn't get those things through. And then David, go for it.
Yes, I can answer the question from John Heap. So yes, I see your point. Yes, during the scope of a FOFBOL, you may be doing some work with customers, and you'll be building a further understanding with them of the way forward. But the key point here is that you need to have that sort of understanding whilst you're developing the application, to ensure that you've sort of spoken to those users or customers to understand their needs and the needs of the market, to ensure that the project itself is taking forward in that direction to answer those key important points, to then make sure that it has success in the market. So it's about that customer understanding, building the technical plan to meet that understanding and their needs, and at the end of that project, then they should be in a place to then move forward to the next steps.
Thanks, David. And continue to work through those. Sian Ringrose has a query about the application form. Actually, the follow-on fund is currently going through the new UKRI grant system called the funding service. So it will look quite a bit different to a kind of a traditional sort of JES process. Think more like the DVLA when you're renewing your car tax type, that where you'll car tax, you'll have a question and a text box underneath, and you can enter the information as you go through. So it's enabled us through piloting follow-on fund last time round, and now running it continuously through this new system to tailor actually the kind of the flow through of the questions and the application process much more for follow-on fund. So it'll look quite a bit different to a standard kind of research grant application. And then we've got a question around, balancing that piece around openness of data. Yes, that's obviously a thing where you're trying to balance, making sure that the data can be made accessible through various databases, and then having a way of managing that asset so you can deliver kind of commercial or business focused outputs. It's definitely something that is perfectly manageable, and often the data in its kind of raw form that's put into publicly accessible databases is aggregated together, and often doesn't negate any particular kind of commercial opportunity. I would suggest speaking to your knowledge exchange professionals, tech transfer team, commercial teams at the research organisation, and they'll be able to advise on kind of approaches you can do that. Each instance is obviously slightly different. Looking at some of the other questions around whether some aspects of work can be contracted to a CRO. Yes, no problem at all. In fact, that's not an uncommon thing, particularly if you're wanting things to be done under certain conditions, or there's substantial amounts of particular animal work that might be better placed within a CRO. So we do see costs coming in for that. It varies depending on the project, obviously, or the traditional sort of justification for why that's the most appropriate route. But often accessing that kind of scale up or large scale capability is a reasonable request. Just asking where there's a question around whether the research or the PI needs to be based in a bioscience related area. Not specifically, no. As long as there is a link to that previous BBSRC work, we often see a range of different individuals involved in the grants putting together a kind of a diverse skill set. David may have seen more of these things coming through, but no, there's no expectation on that particular background. It's making sure that the right team is in place to deliver on that market opportunity. So whatever skill set is required there is perfectly legitimate to be on the project.
Yeah, you're exactly right from what Adam said. Important to us is that the project itself remains within our remit. So if you have any questions around that, please feel free to get in touch in advance, and we can look at the remit question in advance of your application. But once an application comes in, we look at all of them again, just checking to make sure that it fits within BBSRC remit.
Excellent. Thanks, David. And then we've got a couple of others around whether Institute Strategic Programme grants are sort of an eligible kind of, yes, very definitely. We see a lot of applications coming through linked to kind of funding at BBSRC strategically funded institutes. And then I think Sue Smith's got a query around sort of that medical area and sort of grants that are underpinning research and then how they move towards that potential medical application. I would say in whatever instance that is, if you're unsure, to give the office a call, because every project is different and there's often sort of quite a detailed kind of conversation there. But broadly, we recognise that there is a kind of, for a number of the projects, we might support a transition through to potentially a clinical application. And that's absolutely fine. There's no issues with that. We work really closely with colleagues in MRC around that kind of transition and that movement, into that kind of clinical space. Broadly, I would say that as long as the work is maybe applicable to a whole range of different application areas, potentially some in that clinical space, that work would be okay, and we'd be able to support that. In addition, if it's a diagnostic or platform technology that might be you might be able to identify particular markets, and you might test one or two areas there, but it has quite broad applicability. Again, that's something that we have historically supported, but appreciate that it's often very specific to the individual kind of project and the likely direction. So always worth giving us a call. Happy to have a chat around how projects fit within and then where they might transition across to that MRC sort of space. And then what have we got? We've got one around principal and investigator at a different institution where the grant was originally awarded. That's fine. People move around. There's no problem there. Because it's linked to some sort of intellectual asset, there'd normally have to be an outline of how that is being managed. Whether we have seen where the asset is still retained within the original institution, and there is a plan for how that would be progressed there. That's okay. And we've also seen where there's a collaboration between the new institution back with the old one to be able to access those intellectual assets to progress the project. So no problem. There's lots of ways to manage that. Dates for the next cycle. I'm unsure whether they're kind of penciled in yet.
So I can give an idea of the time scales that we'll have for the next timeframes for the next calls. So the dates haven't been confirmed yet, but we will be running it in the same sort of time, in the same window. So looking at a call opening in January, so similar to this year, call opening in January and closing around mid-March. And then similar again, would be a call opening around August and then closing October in 2023. So looking at the same timescales. Excellent.
Thank you, David. And we publish those as when we know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So once the dates have been confirmed, they will then be published on the BBSRC follow-on fund page.
Excellent. Thank you. I can't see any other questions. There's a question there around eligible costs and staff costs. I don't know, David, whether you're more familiar with.
So I think maybe Jane might be best to answer this one.
Excellent, Jane.
Yeah, so it's a question about whether as a PI can apply and have their salary covered through FOF. So no, we wouldn't expect that to be the case. We would expect a PI to be working at lecturer level or equivalent, with the salaries covered by their organisation, and we would expect to see maybe 5, 10, 20% of their salary being covered by the grant as a PI. If you're not eligible to apply in that route, then you can come in through being a PDRA. And I'm not sure, David, whether we've got the Res Co-I offering or not through this system, because it's been coming and going over FOF at the moment.
So for this call, no, we don't have that on this call.
So unfortunately, you can't apply as a research co-investigator, which would kind of give you the same kind of kudos, but you would have your salary covered. But you can still apply finding a PI to work with as a PDRA if you need your entire salary covered through the FOF.
Thanks, Jane. Just looking to see if there are any other questions coming through. Appreciating that often, well, I certainly do, after I've had the conversation, I realised that there was another question I wanted to ask. Please do feel free, if you've got any queries or questions relating to sort of potential applications, to come through to us, and we're always happy to either answer by email or to have a chat on the phone if it's a slightly more detailed query. And just to reiterate that we'll circulate the recording of this and the slides afterwards as well. I'll give it another minute to see if any more queries come through. But if not, I think it looks like we've covered the majority of those. So I think it's just a thank you once again for everyone who came along today to join us for the Follow-on Fund webinar. Really great to have you along. Thank you for all the questions. Really appreciate those. It helps us understand the kind of the questions that are out there for the competition. And yeah, really great to have those. And we will be in touch with any of the queries. There was one additional question that's come up around CV for team or each named person. I know that, David, there's been a change for how we manage that.
Yes, so it's now a resume for researchers and innovators. It's a 2-page or with a word limit within TFS that is meant to be a narrative format where you describe the different skills and experiences of the team, highlighting the key experiences and skills that will enable that team to carry out the project itself. So some more details are on the FOF opportunity page for that. But if you have any further questions, please do get in touch.
Thanks, David. Excellent. And on that note, so yeah, just thank you once again for everyone for joining us. I know that the panel here has really enjoyed being able to speak to you and to answer all the questions, and hope to receive follow-on fund applications in the next or future rounds. Excellent. So thank you all now.